What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into this edition of Talking with Teel. There is a lot going on surrounding Virginia Tech athletics, whether it be the situation with Whit Babcock, Virginia Tech men's basketball, Mike Young being here at ACC Tipoff, and much more to get to surrounding the Hokies. So who better to bring on, of course, than the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel, here in Charlotte. All that and much more coming up on this edition of Talking with Teel, which starts right now. And we're recording on Tuesday, October 7th, 2025, from the Hilton Charlotte Uptown in Charlotte, North Carolina. Remember, like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. I'm your host, Carter Hill. To my right is our managing editor, David Cunningham. Across the way is the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel, and we are so thrilled you could join us on your Tuesday morning. David, how are you? Appreciate you stopping by as always, and fun to catch up on what's going on around Virginia Tech athletics.
Guys, good morning. Carter wins all the first place votes. He's wearing the proper Tech Sideline attire, and he brought me a Diet Coke. So Carter is 2 for 2 this morning, batting 1,000.
Had to bring the Diet Coke. Yeah, had to bring the Diet Coke. I do want to start with this. Obviously, the big news surrounding Virginia Tech athletics is the podcast that was put out there by Tech Athletics this past weekend, where Whit Babcock, the director of athletics at Virginia Tech, sat down with Bill Roth. I assume you listened to that podcast.
Oh, with Bill, yes.
What were your takeaways from what you heard, and where do the Hokies, in your opinion, necessarily go from here?
Well, number one, I applaud Bill because I think he asked all the right questions. And Whit gave the best answers that he could. I'm almost certain that he was operating under some certain constraints. I also think there are things that not even he knows. And I'm sure that frustrates him no end. Several times when we've talked about this since Coach Pry's departure, we've mentioned the importance of the rollout. It pretty much failed. Remember when Amy Sebring presented to the Board of Visitors about the financial plan? She said, make no mistake, this is going to be a heavy lift on the money side. Make no mistake, Virginia Tech has made this a heavier lift by how it's rolled all this out, because it has been ineffective, it's been confusing, you don't know who's in charge. I think there are some people who think they're in charge and maybe are not. And you've got Bruce Arians out there talking to Pat McAfee, and then Whit is walking that back with Bill Roth in terms of the sequencing of the hire, and just a lot of mixed messaging, and they've got to do better.
I think Virginia Tech, all Tim Sands and the Board of Visitors had talked about over the last handful of weeks is we need to be more aligned, and we're going to be more aligned. And then all this happens, and it looks like they're not aligned at all.
It does not. And maybe they have a plan to correct that. It would be nice if they would share that with others. Maybe it's a plan in progress. The search committee strikes me as unwieldy at 8 members. That's no knock against any individuals on the committee. I thought that Chris threw out a really interesting observation about the committee when he said Jeff Bourne should have been on it. The former Tech administrator who then went on to become an administrator at Georgia Tech, and then from Georgia Tech went to James Madison. That guy hired 3 really good football coaches at James Madison, and he hired a bunch of other really good coaches. And his expertise in that area, I think, would have been invaluable. And frankly, it's not a name that crossed my mind. Kudos to Chris for coming up with it. Obviously too late. They're not going to add him at this point. But again, a missed opportunity. Someone at Virginia Tech should have been thinking like Chris outside the box. Hey, here's a guy.
Is the committee too big, in your opinion? There are 8 names on that list,
Yeah.
multiple football personalities, but is it too big, in your opinion?
Yes. I've been on committees before, search committees. Blessedly few, I'll say, but enough to know what it can be like. and too many voices, and frankly, too many egos. There's a lot of egos in that room, and rightfully so. Some very accomplished people who are going to be very strong-willed about their preferences and what they want to see. You read through all the resumes, and we're not familiar with the folks from the business world who happen to be Virginia Tech alums. But all those folks, they didn't make their bones by deferring to others. It just strikes me as a very strong-willed group. And who's going to be the consensus builder in that room? That's what's going to be, and we'll never know because we won't be inside. But wow, it's watching the search unfold. And again, what was Whit Babcock known? All his searches, whether they hit or they didn't, they were pretty buttoned up. This one's, there are 8 people. There are going to be leaks, I think. It just seems inevitable.
What do you feel like? It feels like Whit is in an interesting position here. Like his role is unclear. He spoke a little bit about it with Bill on the podcast, just that he's going to use his expertise a little bit to share some knowledge and guide the search committee along. But it's such a strange position where he's the sitting AD, but he's not making the hire. He's helping, but how much? I mean, it doesn't seem like he really has input, but it seems like he might want to have input. Like, so it seems like his hands are tied.
Oh, yes, but he is hogtied, and it's very uncomfortable for him. And his phrasing to Bill was interesting in that, you know, he's going to advise and coordinate, and he's also going to handle the agents. And he knows that world, and that's very smart to give him that responsibility. But then he talked about the committee coming up with as many as 4 finalists, for lack of better description, and then moving those on to the hiring authorities, whom Whit identified as himself, President Sands and John Rakovich, the board rector. So will Whit have a final say in the hire? And beyond the hire, what is his future? I mean, is Virginia Tech really going to use him, and use in all caps, use him to assist in this search and then kick him to the curb? I mean, really? If you were going to kick him to the curb, we've talked about it before. Georgia Tech set the template when it fired Todd Stansberry and it fired Jeff Collins on the same dang day. Rip the Band-Aid off, be done with it. And you say, oh my gosh, you know, but then you can't get the AD on the job time. They did. They got Jay Batt in from Alabama, and then he made the decision to retain Brent Key. They fell into it. And lo and behold, who does Virginia Tech play this week?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. And now, hey, Jay Batt's long gone. He's since left for Michigan State. But they made it work. Virginia Tech could have made it work if it was their ultimate aim. If indeed Whit's tenure is done at the end of the calendar year or at the end of the search, what a ham-handed way to deal with this.
It seems so, for lack of a better term, off. Like something is so off somewhere here.
Oh, no, not somewhere, Carter. Everywhere, at every level.
Well, you're hearing all this messaging coming from all these different places, and then you hear this podcast coming from the source itself, and they're talking about, year 13, and this is what we're going to try and do by January. The biggest thing to me that still stands out is what happened on the Pat McAfee show. Bruce Arians, a member of the search committee, goes on one of the most listened to sports talk radio shows in the country and tells everybody that Virginia Tech is hiring a general manager first. Well, then just over a week later, your director of athletics goes on an in-house podcast and says, oh, well, I think we're going to hire the head coach before we hire the general manager. The complete opposite thing that was said in front of millions of people just over a week ago. That's where the messaging is just a little bit off. And on top of that, too, the general consensus during this whole thing was that a general manager was going to A, oversee football, and B, have the ultimate power over football. Well, in this podcast, it was talked about that in all likelihood, there will be a 50-50 power between the general manager and the head coach. That is not the GM overseeing football.
Well, I don't know if it will be. He mentioned the Ole Miss example as something that really works. So clear, Whit has done some research here, and I applaud him. You know, he's prepared for this, and it's obviously working at Ole Miss. I mean, look how they hit on the quarterback from what's the Division II school?
Ferris State.
Ferris State, and he's killing it. And they know what they're doing in Oxford. The whole Arians thing, I assure you, this is how it happened. So Arians, as we talked about last night at the public house over a cold one, Arians and McAfee have a history. They overlapped with the Indianapolis Colts. So there's that, one season. But there is that familiarity. And Bruce is a big personality. McAfee revels in just getting people talking. And so Arians, whether he was told to say that or whether he just thought it or misinterpreted, so he says that. I guarantee you that within 10 minutes of that show ending, Whit Babcock was getting calls from the agent community saying, what in the hell are you doing? Because my client is not going to be interested if that's the way it's going to roll.
I mean, I think hiring the head coach is 100% the right move because he has to come in and hire the general manager and they have to be on the same page. But it just goes back to this alignment where the messaging, the rollout is really, really bad. Back to Babcock, I think it's so interesting. He talked about how he's going to advise and suggest that they use some advanced analytics on this. And you talked about the search committee and how who's going to get the consensus. And it just seems like there are a lot of egos on this committee, and doesn't really seem like a rudder to steer the ship. It's just like a lot of people who, the two very esteemed businesswomen have probably made a lot of big time hires in their day.
Yeah.
And Bruce Arians was a head coach. He knows it. I mean, Bud Foster is on there, but he didn't. I mean, he's never hired a general manager or a head coach before. Right. Eddie Royal's never hired a head coach before. You've got board of visitor members who have never hired. They've never been in this position before. Right. So it's like you hire a lot of people with expertise in the business realm, maybe, or in the football realm. But it seems like too big of a group when you don't necessarily have a clear identifier of, hey, this person's kind of going to lead the search. And I figure maybe John Rakovich, the board's rector, would be in charge and help with that. But if there is one, it's unclear.
Yeah. It's clear as mud is what Babcock likes to say. A couple things about Whit. He would be the first to tell you, and he did with Bill. He understands it's a results-driven business. And his two football hires at Virginia Tech clearly did not work. But what Whit doesn't mention, and I understand why, and your listeners aren't going to want to hear this, but I don't much care. When they hired Justin Fuente, he was the coach du jour.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
He was in demand. And because Coach Beamer had been gracious enough to announce his retirement when he did, which I believe was mid to late October, It was during that off week, right? And that gave Whit a runway, and he was able to literally outflank other power conference programs who fancied Justin Fuente. And not only did he land Fuente, he convinced Bud, who wanted the damn job himself, to put his ego aside and say, you know what, I'll even stay on as defensive coordinator. Now, did it work? Eventually, no, it didn't. But sometimes coaching hires don't work. But you can't have anticipated the hows and the whys of that failure. And so, yes, bang on him because the 2 football hires didn't work. Would I have hired Brent Pry? I don't know. I don't know what the other options were. I'm not a big fan of rookie head coaches, especially at the power conference level. But they do work. It's not to say they can't. But I think folks need to remember, Fuente was a very hot commodity, and Whit Babcock and Virginia Tech landed. It's not like he doesn't know how to run a search and how to land a good coach. And witnesses other hires in other sports, and we've gone down that roster, and it's quite impressive.
We were talking about this last night, and even just a minute ago too. But we joke about the Bill Belichick situation at Carolina,
oh yeah,
and rightfully so.
Let's joke. It is rife for comedy.
They may actually go 3-9, and we were talking about that last week, and they may be lucky to go 3-9 the way they look on the field. But that is a disaster. That goes without saying. Disaster what's going on the field, and then disaster when it comes to away from the programs here. Really, not even away from the program, away from the field. I mean, we're seeing this reportedly, the whole social media fiasco with their social media team can't post stuff about the Patriots, which is why we haven't seen until yesterday Drake May highlights and stuff like that. It's just a whole entire mess. With that being said, Virginia Tech needs to be careful, doesn't it? Because there's a way to make a connection here. And I'm not saying that Virginia Tech's going to hire Bill Belichick 2.0, but from a BOV standpoint, it feels like the Hokies got to be careful with what's going on in Blacksburg, no?
100% Carr, because what happened at Carolina was the board ignored the athletic director's advice. Bubba Cunningham, one of the best athletics directors in this country and one of the most respected. And his preferred candidate was John Sumrall at Tulane. How many people wearing baby blue these days would kill to have John Sumrall coaching that football program right now, given the clown show that has since transpired? And this was all trustees driven. We're smarter than everybody else. You all who run athletics, you don't know athletics like we do. Really? And this is what you've come up with. You've turned your football program into a laughing stock. And you could have seen it coming. And I know people at Carolina who have been there forever, and they are a prideful people as well. They should be. That is an athletic department that is as well-rounded and successful as any in the country, and certainly is the tops in this conference. But they haven't won a football championship since 1980 when Lawrence Taylor was playing linebacker for them. And it's remarkable to me that they made the decision that they did. And now, and it's not just the product on the field is atrocious. Witness the first half against Clemson. I saw it against TCU, and then we saw it on TV against UCF. But the fans are just bailing after a quarter. And you mentioned the whole social media with Drake, and Belichick has just proven to be petty and small. It's so unbecoming because he really is among the GOATs of his profession at the NFL level. And there was this arrogance at Carolina that we know better, than everybody else.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I think that's why the Hokies have to be very, very careful, because when you've got so many committees and a board of visitors, who knows which way it could go.
And we didn't mention the other committee that Tim Sands revealed. I hope I get this right. It's going to be the investment oversight, the athletics investment oversight committee. Who's going to be on that? How many people? How much influence? Are they just going to be essentially auditors? Or are they going to be making decisions as to how this annual cash influx is spent? And if that committee is empowered, and you're looking for an athletic director in that environment who's essentially being told, yeah, you're going to have all this money at your disposal, but you're not going to decide. You're not going to be the one who decides how to invest it. Fraught with peril.
It's so interesting. Such a unique time. It's funny, we were talking about this way back before Pry was gone, that if Virginia Tech would have to do something, it would be such a chaotic situation, and here we are a couple weeks later, and I think it's even more chaotic than we would have imagined.
Yeah.
Andy,
it's content, though, and what do we crave more than anything else in our racket?
Well,
content.
Yes, the people love it. The subscribers love eating it alive. Andy, I believe, touched on this yesterday on the podcast, that there was supposed to be a meeting with Babcock this week, and it got moved. It was supposed to be a small group session, I think. Why? Do you have any insight, do you think, as to why it might have been moved? And I mean, I think so many people, fans are just interested to hear actual reasoning. And Babcock has not really taken any questions on this. He didn't take any questions when Pry was fired, and when he introduced Philip Montgomery, and he goes on the podcast with Bill Roth. He hasn't answered any questions from the actual media. You know, it's like he keeps trying to swerve and avoid it, but his orders might be from above him.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner, Johnny. I don't think Whit decided to postpone. I think that was probably a group decision. And in Whit's defense, I think he wants to be able to provide as accurate and as complete information as he can, and he still doesn't have it. And I can't imagine how crazy and perhaps angry that makes him. And I'm not trying to foreshadow anything here. I'm just trying to put myself in his shoes. But at some point, even during this search, does he just say, peace out? I've had enough. You have pushed me too far. Now, maybe his contract is so darn convoluted, I still haven't figured out the particulars of buyouts and what the exact amount would be. We know he's contracted through 29. Would he cost himself some money if he walked away? How significant would that haircut be? I don't know. But there's got to be a breaking point there, and I wonder how close he is to that.
So 2 questions, and one is a little bit repetitive. But first off, have you ever covered an event like this before? And second of all...
Actually, yes.
Okay.
But what's second of all?
And second of all, how does this all end up shaking out, do you think?
Man. All right, first of all, well, Virginia Tech history, and David, you might have to help me out with the Google machine because I don't have my dates written down because I didn't anticipate going there. But when Bill Dooley was excused as head football coach and athletic director back in the mid-'80s, a gentleman from the Southwest Conference named Dutch Bachman became the athletic director at Virginia Tech. And Dutch hired Frank Beamer. Pretty good hire, huh? Should have made Dutch Bachman one of the great figures in Virginia Tech athletics history. Went on to a great career as the AD there, right? No. He was there
6 months, according
Boom.
to this 2015 article from the GOAT, Jimmy Robertson.
There you go. 6 months. Because Virginia Tech was less than forthcoming with its financial situation to Mr. Bachman when they hired him. And he, like I wonder with Whit, Dutch reached his breaking point. And he quit just on the spot. There were banners hanging out of the Merriman Center, "Don't go Dutch." And, imagine being Frank Beamer back then. Here's the guy who hired you, and 6 months later, he's out the door. Now, hey, they landed on their feet. They got Dave Brain from Marshall, and it turned out to be great. But you asked if I'd ever covered a time that is like turbulence, because back then there were NCAA sanctions, and Dooley had created a mess, and Charlie Moyer had been nudged aside on the men's basketball side. That was the most chaotic time in Virginia Tech history, athletics history. Now, today, it's not only chaotic, but the financial implications, Carter, are so much greater. Because as Whit keeps reminding folks, it costs money to lose now, because you're going to lose on the viewership initiative, and you're going to lose on the ACC's success initiative. So every time when you're losing football games, you are costing your athletic department millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it wasn't that way back then. Back then, Virginia Tech's a football independent. It's essentially out there on an island. This is so much more crucial from a fiscal standpoint. You asked me how I think it's going to. I have no earthly idea how this is going to turn out.
This article I found from Jimmy Robertson, it says, there's a paragraph here. It says, unfortunately, Bauman never witnessed Beamer coach a game as the AD of Virginia Tech. He resigned 6 months later following Beamer's Christmas hiring after the university administration failed to inform him during his interview that the Hokies basketball program also was being investigated by the NCAA. But yeah, you talk about fiscal implications. I just think I could totally, from Whit's perspective, see a breaking point of some sort. Especially, you talk about how buttoned up he always is with these things. Whit is, it seems like he's always the master of no leaks, and if there's a name thrown out there, there's always a reason, right? Every leak has a motive. That's what he always says. And one of the guys on the search committee, he's an ACC Network personality. And you've got a former head coach who went on the McAfee show before they had announced who was on the search committee. And I feel like that aspect of it, the getting the stuff out there that if I'm him, as buttoned up as it's been in the past, that would frustrate me, knowing how out there this thing might be.
Let me remind you about something. When Frank Beamer retired, so I had a tip that it was going to happen. But the person who told me said, please, we want to tell the players first. We will let you know when he is in the room with the players, then you can go. And I agreed to that embargo. About 15 minutes before that, the news broke of Frank Beamer's retirement. Do you know where it broke from?
ESPN?
No.
I don't remember.
An Arizona television station Who was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals when Frank Beamer retired?
It wouldn't happen to be Bruce Arians, would it?
Correct. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, Bruce. Bruce Arians he played at Virginia Tech, and he was a GA at Virginia Tech, and obviously has deep ties that go back to his time in the 70s at Tech, and so that's interesting, very interesting. But yeah, that's you talk about leaks and whatnot. What is somebody who? You look at the Buzz situation, the Fuente situation. He was able. He was able to coup these coaches and get them to come to Blacksburg, and there might have been little hints here or there, but for the most part, very tight lid on things. And I just wonder if stuff starts to get out, how frustrating that would be from his perspective, where he is tied, hands behind his back a little bit, and there's all this stuff going around, and he's the spokesman still they're rolling out for this, and it doesn't seem like he has any power at all.
Guys, have John Rakovich, Tim Sands, Ryan McCarthy, or Jay Pearson faced a single question?
No. The decision makers are not the ones that are the spokesperson, to your point.
Hello? Anybody home? If you want to run the show, own it. Be accountable. You are a public institution making a very public hire that thousands, tens of thousands of Hokies fans care deeply about. You owe them to talk, in my opinion.
Well, I think clarity is imperative, and you're asking, we go back to the philanthropy aspect of it. You're asking for a lot of money. And if I'm a Virginia Tech fan sitting here going, they're asking me for my money, and I don't know who's running the ship. There are all of these voices, and it's mixed messaging. Where is this all coming from? It's confusing. And I think, Tim Sands being the one, his quotes were in the press release when Pry was fired, but they rolled Whit Babcock out. And then they have the Board of Visitors meeting, and Sands is the one that puts the quotes out, and Rakovich was the one who was doing all the speaking, with the exception of a little bit from Sands. And then they bring Whit back out to speak on it. And I get it, he's the athletic director, but it seems like Rakovich and Sands are the ones who are going to be making this final decision, although Whit mentioned it's all over the place. And as a fan, it's like, who in the world is, and even for the media, we're like, what is going on? And it'd be nice, I'm sure when Whit eventually does speak to this group of media, there might be a point in there where he's like, I don't know what's going on, because it's such a convoluted situation.
No, it truly is. And did you guys watch the virtual Board of Visitors meeting? Did you notice Whit up in the corner? So he was zoomed in along with the board members and Amy and such, but he was never invited to speak.
Are you concerned at all in terms of how the fan base is going to perceive this? I mean, obviously it's very, very out there that, Virginia Tech and their fan base does not think that the current athletic administration is going to get them on the other side of this thing. But when you're asking for more money, like Virginia Tech is, are you concerned that that is going to have a long-term impact on Virginia Tech?
Yeah, clearly the fan base is out on those folks. But I think what the fan base will respond to is the new football coach. That's what's going to turn heads. And do you have to win the press conference? No. But you better darn well find an accomplished football coach, someone who you can put up there and say, See this guy? To quote Kurt Signetti, paraphrase Kurt Signetti, Google him. He wins. Right? Right? It's imperative. It is non-negotiable. Like, they talk about what qualities do we want in a head coach. Yeah, put me in that room, and I'll tell you, there's only one quality that's paramount here. You can go through all that other stuff, and okay, this would be nice, and this would be nice. You must have somebody who has proven that he can win football games, and preferably, there might be a one-hit wonder out there, but not for one season, not for 2 seasons, and preferably maybe not even at one place.
I think this is a good time to transition to basketball, since we are at the ACC Tipoff, and we're sitting here on Radio Row, and we've been recording for half an hour.
Because I ramble too much. Sorry.
No. Well, we're going to hear from Commissioner Phillips here in probably an hour at noon.
Is it at noon? 12:30?
12:30. Yeah, I think it's 12:30.
I hope we have time for the free lunch. Come on, guys.
Yeah. We're going to hear from him a little bit this afternoon, and Virginia Tech is on deck at around 4, I think. What do you just make of ACC basketball this year? And it seems like there are a couple of Duke, Louisville at the top, and it seems like the league has a lot of new life coming in from new coaches. Will Wade,
Ryan Odom
among them.
Jay Lucas, Luke Locks at Florida
the 2
State.
Florida schools. What do you make of just the league? It seems like everybody's going to be in a much better position this year, and even those that were at the bottom, Mike Young towards the bottom last year, more resources for some of those schools too.
It's interesting, Dave. I read my friend Brendan Marks, who does a great job covering hoops for The Athletic, did a projected order of finish today. Dude, he had the Hokies 15th. And I was like, ouch. and he even raved about Neo, but obviously not impressed with the rest of the roster. I'm like, that's a little undervalued in my opinion. I haven't done my 1 through 18, but I assure you that the Hokies will not be in the teens. The league has to be better. If last season is not the nadir for this league, heaven help them. I mean, 4 teams out of 18 in the tournament when it probably should have been 3. Did Carolina really belong, or was that just a gold watch for Bubba Cunningham on his last season serving the search committee? Or not the search committee, I'm getting the selection committee. Too many damn committees, guys. So the league almost, just through natural cycles, has to be better. But you mentioned Duke, Louisville, NC State, Virginia, Carolina. To me, that's your top 5. And after that, you can start flipping coins. We mentioned, not to dive back into football, but in terms of, do you hire a proven head coach? Do you hire the hot assistant? And what the 4 ACC openings, 2 and 2. Luke Loucks and Jay Lucas, brand new. Ryan Odom and Will Wade, been there, done that at several schools.
So where do you see Virginia Tech finishing in the ACC? Can they get to that top 5? Or I guess maybe in other words, what is a bridge too far for the Hokies this season, in your opinion?
See, Carter, your question is very valid, but in this day and age, impossible to answer. Who among us has seen these guys play? We have, okay, we see YouTube of Neo, or we just, it's impossible to know. I want to ask Mike Young this, and heck, I should just ask you. has Virginia Tech ever had a men's basketball roster where not a single solitary player is in as much as his third year in the program?
I don't believe so.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I'd have to go back and do the research.
It has to be a first in Mike Young's career. Because wasn't last year Poteet's third year in the program?
Yeah. Poteet had been around.
Yeah. So, and hadn't Wessler.
Yes, and Wessler had been around too.
Yeah. I mean, not a big, well, he was big, but not a valuable, but he'd been around. Nobody on this roster is either 2 years or second year or first year. You know, sign of the times. But, man, if that doesn't tell you what a mystery this group is. Now, the same applies to several programs, including UVA and Louisville. Not, strangely enough, Duke, which is more experienced than usual in terms of returning talent. But I will pick the Hokies, I think, in the top half. But in the SEC last year, the top half, you were comfortably in the NCAA tournament. Is the ACC going to be good enough where if you finish in the top half, you're going to make the NCAA tournament? And what will be fascinating to watch is these 2 extra non-conference games that everybody had to schedule, admittedly on very short notice because the decision came to pare back to 18 league games so late in the offseason. Those extra games that teams scheduled out of conference, were you aggressive enough? And then can you, in terms of quality of opponent, and are you good enough to then win enough of those games to improve your net rankings and the overall narrative surrounding the league? And oh, by the way, don't go 2-14 in the ACC SEC Challenge.
There's a lot of, obviously in this day and age in the transfer portal, a lot of newcomers. Are there 1 or 2 newcomers to the league? Maybe not at Virginia Tech, because we obviously know about Neoclis of Dallas and whatnot. Are there like 1 or 2 newcomers to the league? Maybe a Darren Williams at NC State. I mean, that you got your eye on and go, man, he's a dude.
Well, he is it. See, that's somebody we know is a dude. I mean, all Big 12 first team. I mean, yeah, he can go. I mean, if he's not on your first team preseason All ACC, you're doing it wrong. But you know, Testa Ritter at UVA, fascinated to see him. They shelled out big bucks for him. And then you got the Boozer twins at Duke, you know, following their dad's legacy. Those are guys that spring to mind. You've got the Arizona big transfer at Carolina. You know, how does he fit in there? You know, Coach Davis was, you could see he was so frustrated. He's been in Carolina for so long and been a part of that program for so long, and their tradition and their heritage is built on all these post guys just overwhelming opponents on the glass, and they had none of that last year. So he goes out and gets much bigger, and so that will be interesting to see in Chapel Hill. So, you know, those are just some of the folks that come to mind. Henry Visar, am I pronouncing that? I hesitated because now that I'm in the yodeling business with y'all, I need to do a better job of learning how to pronounce these names instead of spelling them.
Visar is, I believe, how it's pronounced. There are a couple interconference transfers too. Isaac McNeely to Louisville, and Van Allen Lubin. What stands out to you about some of those guys?
Well, it's not a new phenomenon. We're like a couple years into the whole. Yeah. Well, I mean, Jaden Shute.
When Jaden Young just went. Jaden Shute went from Duke to Tech, and Jaden Young went to Carolina from Virginia Tech.
Yeah, so it happens, and you know, and Day Ames.
At Cal, right?
Day Ames was at UVA last year, and he's here this season, you know, representing the Cal Golden Bears.
Nathan George went from Georgia Tech to Syracuse.
And, dude, I like I like his game. I think he could really help Coach Autry a bunch. But yeah, the whole interconference thing. IMAC is gonna. I like him. He's always been very respectful and interesting to talk to, and it'll be a big change for him. You know, Pat Kelsey and Tony Bennett are about as polar opposite as it gets. It'll be interesting to see how McNeely's game emerges and develops under Coach Kelsey.
One of the last things wanted to ask you about was the Air Force Navy game you got to witness this weekend.
Man.
We're talking a lot of offense, including through the air, which is not normal maybe for a Navy Air Force game. What was the pageantry like, that experience? And you got a heck of a game.
Oh, it was a record-setting game, David. Blake Horvath, the Navy quarterback, set a school record for single-game total offense. His wideout, Eli Heidenreich, school record 200-plus receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. But you mentioned the pageantry, and at the risk of boring you and your listeners, my introduction to college football, and it was such a blessing to me, I always get emotional talking about it, is our father-son thing, my dad and me. He took his only child to 25 consecutive Army-Navy football games. From 1966, when I was 7 years old, until 1990, the year before he died. And that was our thing, man, and including a trip to the Rose Bowl when it was out there in Pasadena. And you talk about pageantry and respect, and my dad always taught me, you know, these young men, they're not on scholarship to just play football. They're going to go serve your country for many years to come after they finish at these academies. So to go back to the Naval Academy, where I've been many times before, I grew up in Baltimore, and I know the academy. Michael Kelly, the new athletic director at Navy, is a longtime friend, used to be a senior associate commissioner for football here at the ACC, and then went on to be the first chief operating officer of the college football playoff, and then was the AD at South Florida. And we were talking about it, and obviously, you grow up in the 757, huge military. I mean, Norfolk is the naval capital of the world, and Langley Air Force Base. And Michael texted me one day, he goes, dude, you ought to come up for Air Force Navy. And I'm like, that sounds like fun. And then I looked at the rest of the schedule, and Virginia Tech Wake, whatever. UVA at Louisville, not knowing that UVA was going to be in the top 25, but then thinking, I ain't driving 10 hours each way to Louisville. So no, Michael invited me up, spent the day with him Friday, before the game, and went to the dress parade, which is kind of a Friday afternoon ritual the day before a home game, where the brigade marches on to the parade field there on the academy grounds. And then saw a hell of a football game. And you're right, you think Service Academy football, you think the option and 2-hour and 20-minute game because they're never throwing, the clock never stops. But they've unearthed this new OC, second-year offensive coordinator, Drew Cronick at Navy, he was a former head coach at Mercer, and they call it the Millennial Wing Team, which is kind of cool. I like the moniker, and they got the quarterback to make it happen. And Air Force secondary, not great. So maybe made them look a little better than they are. But it was a wild fun afternoon in Annapolis. So thanks for asking, and sorry to ramble.
No. Where are you at this weekend, football-wise?
Going to Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah, drive home very late Wednesday night, be home with the girls on Thursday, and then fly out Friday morning to Atlanta. And kind of go right about how Georgia Tech can be a role model for Virginia Tech, or at least an example of this is what can happen if you find the right guy. And we talked about head coaching experience being non-negotiable. He didn't have any. I mean, they fell into it with Brent Key. He's one of theirs, and he loves the place and understands it, and apparently he can coach some ball too.
Ooh, I would love to have Brent Key at Virginia Tech. And that'll never happen. That'll never happen for a lot of different reasons, obviously. But Chris always talks about it. That is a ball coach. And he just knows how to coach football. And to be honest, he's made Georgia Tech pretty fun to root for, too, when they're not playing the Hokies.
They are. They're fun to watch. And before we go, I have an assignment for Chris.
Okay.
Because Chris is doing all these coaching candidate previews. Well, now he's got to add like another category or a couple more categories. Because Whit mentioned on the pod with Bill that he wants to use analytics to do deep dives into these coaches. So I need Chris to start calculating the one-loss record in one-score games for all these guys. He's got more research on his hands. I want analytical breakdowns of these guys on all the candidates. I want him to do the research so I can lift it and credit him, of course, but that was among the most fascinating things that Whit talked with Bill about.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to bring that up because that's what when we were talking about Whit and just his influence on this committee. He said, I'm going to suggest that they use these analytics. And Chris and I have actually had conversations in the office about, if you were going to hire a head coach, you'd probably want to look at a bunch of numbers. And I think some of those numbers might stand out for some people on the committee more than others. Obviously, Bruce Arians, an Eddie Royal, Bud Foster would probably drool over some of those numbers, those one-score games and record ahead at halftime. But Whit broke it down as far as, hey, if you're looking, you got to dive into that stuff now and use data analytics to make a decision like that. I'm trying to pull up the full quote, but he's talking about the value. Oh yeah, okay. Here we go. Here's the full quote. One-score games percentage, which I thought was funny. He mentioned that, of course, with Brent Pry.
Yeah.
What's your win-loss record when you're favored in a game? Your win-loss record when you're underdogs.
How about that?
What's your win percentage when you're behind at halftime, showing adjustments in the second half? And you could go on down the list. He said the eye test is important, the traits are important, but I'm hopeful the committee will choose to utilize a data analytics approach to it. And then he mentioned the one-score games. That's intriguing because in some ways that might resonate more to some of these maybe people who don't know as much about football. Mm-hmm. That's something they could relate to a little bit more.
Yes, because they're accustomed to that in their own fields of work. No, it's a really good, and it will be if we ever at the end of the search when they introduce their new coach, will whoever, I mean, who's gonna is Whit gonna stand up and introduce the new coach? Is it gonna is it gonna be Eddie Royal? Is it gonna be like a TV show? I don't. Yeah, you asked how do you see this all shaking out? Again, no earthly idea. But are they literally going to stand up there and say, Coach X, he was like he had a 400 winning percentage in games he was an underdog, and will they break it down for us? I mean, it'll be great. It will be great material if indeed they take the analytics route and then reveal some of the analytics that informed their decision.
Those are oddly specific. Except for the one-score games one. That I can understand why it's on there. There's something odd about that. Hey, before we wrap it up real fast, let's go ahead and step aside, come right back. Let's hear from one of our sponsors at Tyrus Homes here on Tech Sideline.
Are you ready for a custom home tailored to your distinctive lifestyle? At Tyrus Homes, a leading custom home builder in the New River Valley, we pride ourselves on crafting exceptional residences that our clients love to call home. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a growing family in search for more room, An active adult seeking a relaxing retreat, or looking for a higher-end custom home that offers luxury and sophistication, we have the perfect solution for you. Discover how you can bring your dream home to life at TyrusHomes.com. That's TYRIS Homes.com.
Hey, welcome back to this edition of Talking with Teel. Guys, fun podcast today. Got to hit on pretty much everything we wanted to hit on, and there's going to continue to be quite a bit of stuff to talk about over the next couple weeks. So looking forward to it as always. Dave, appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your week in Charlotte. Hopefully you get some good stuff from Mike Young and Ryan Odom, and we look forward to reading all about it this week.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
For the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel, David Cunningham, I'm Carter Hill saying so long from Charlotte, and we'll talk to you very soon.